You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and as promised, I'm going to be breaking down some of the deals that happened yesterday in advance of the NHL's Trade Deadline that I missed yesterday. I'm also going to go over some winners and losers from the NHL Trade Deadline, just because I feel kind of bad that I had to break this up into two shows. It's one thing if new details about trades come out later. You know, there's nothing I can do about that, but no, I missed some pretty big trades like Robin Lehner and Barclay Goodrow. So, I feel kind of bad about that. I really do, so I'm going to go over winners and losers, and there will be some college basketball at the end. So, before I go into some of the deals that I missed, I want to put a finer point on the Sami Vatanen trade. The return that the Devils got has been updated. They are not getting a second-round pick. They're still getting Kuokkanen. But instead of a second, they're getting Frederick Claesson and a fourth-round pick. Hey, I'll tell you what. This changes the deal immensely for the Hurricanes. They easily win it now. I mean, it's not even close. Is Kuokkanen a good prospect? Yeah, from what I gathered, he is. But to not get that second-round pick really hurts the Devils here. Now they're getting Claesson, a quadruple A player, and a fourth-round pick? That's not enough for Vatanen. Vatanen was probably the best defenseman available at the deadline. And all they got for him was a good prospect, a quadruple A defenseman, and a fourth-round pick. That's not enough. The Hurricanes easily won this trade. Alright, now on to some of the moves that I missed, and I'll start with the Flames trading for Erik Gustafsson. They traded a third-round pick this year to get him, and he is incredibly worth it. Last year, I understand he's not having this type of a year this year, but last year, he had 60 points. The guy looked like he was going to be the next great defenseman in this league. The next John Carlson. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't able to carry over to this year. The Blackhawks have been pathetic this year. You gotta think that's part of it. When a team plays bad, that's contagious. Now, I understand last year they weren't world beaters either. But, I gotta tell you, they were better than this year's Blackhawks. They were better than this year's Blackhawks by a mile. Jeremy Colleton has been useless behind the bench. Stan Bowman seems to have lost a step. There are a lot of people that are getting on Bowman. Namely because they've seen how far this team has fallen off, and they really don't like what he's done to try to fix it. They really don't like the Robin Lehner haul, which I'll get into in a minute, but look, it's tough. In the NHL, it is incredibly tough to keep a super team together. Now, we don't think of those Blackhawks teams as super teams, but they were great teams. They were some of the best teams in recent NHL history. Kane, Taves, Sharp, Keith, Seabrook, Bufflin, Corey Crawford, Joel Quenneville behind the bench. They were great teams. But the thing is, there's this little thing in the NHL called the salary cap. And the Blackhawks, every time they reached the mountaintop, had cap concerns. So Bowman had to try to get creative. He had to try to find cheap replacements. He mangled the Artemi Panarin situation. I'm with you there. Panarin should have been with the Blackhawks a lot longer than he was. But, look, it's just tough. I understand that Bowman isn't the GM of old. And if you want to replace him with a younger guy, I don't mind that. But cut Bowman some slack. He's doing the best he can. He's not great. I understand why Blackhawks fans aren't crazy about him. But, again, it's a really tough situation that even the best GM in the league wouldn't be able to pull out of. But back to Gustafsson, I'm going to say that the Flames won this trade. A third-round pick is a very reasonable price to pay for a defenseman who, while he isn't having a fantastic year like he had last year, he's still having a really good year. In 59 games, he has 26 points. That's a really good year. I like Gustafsson a lot. The Flames also traded for Derek Forbort, which was a really stupid trade. I don't like Forbort. I don't think he's very good. So the Kings won that trade, but the Flames won the trade involving the better defenseman. Moving over now to the Robin Lehner trade. And Lehner will always hold a soft spot in my heart. And he will hold a soft spot in any Islanders fan's heart. We all know what he did last year. You don't need me to recap it. All I'm going to say is, I don't like the people that keep criticizing Tavares for going to the Leafs. But what Lehner tweeted was really funny. He photoshopped a panda onto the picture of Tavares in the Maple Leafs bedroom set. That was really funny. But, back to the trade. I understand why Blackhawks fans don't like this trade. You really didn't get a lot for the best goalie available. And look, I understand that Lehner isn't having a great year. He has an over 3 GAA, but he has a .918 save percentage, and he's playing in front of a lousy Blackhawks team. His goals against is going to suffer because of that. We all know how good Lehner is. If you watch him play, he doesn't look that bad. And I gotta tell you, I love the fit of him in Vegas. I'll get into it in a minute. I do want to focus on the Blackhawks a little bit. I understand why there are a lot of Blackhawks fans upset about this trade. I saw a report that said that the Hurricanes were interested in giving up a first for him at one point, and a really good prospect. I don't know how true that is. I mean, it makes sense. The Hurricanes need goalie depth. We all know that. Look, no one loves David Ayers more than me, but the simple fact is, you've got to have a better goalie in your system than Anton Forsberg and Alex Nedeljkovic. I was very, very surprised that the Hurricanes didn't swing even a minor trade for a goalie. They chose to beef up their scoring and defense, which, hey, nothing wrong with that. But I'd have really liked them to have added another goalie. It makes sense to think that the Hurricanes would have offered a lot for Lehner. I don't know if they would have or if they wouldn't have. I don't know what their offer was. And plus, Mrazek and Reimer have been pretty good this year. What are you going to do? Just cast James Reimer off? I don't think that works. I don't mind that the Hurricanes didn't trade for Lehner. I'd have liked them to have traded for a quadruple A goalie, but if they're confident in Forsberg and Nedeljkovic, that's okay too. So I don't know how true it is that the Hurricanes were willing to offer a king's ransom for Lehner. The one thing I do know is that this haul that Bowman got isn't that good. Malcolm Subban was a good try. Alright, he had moments in Vegas where he looked really good, but I don't think he's ever gonna amount to much. If anything, he's just gonna be an average backup. Slava Demin, from what I've gathered, is a nobody. And the second round pick is a reasonable price to pay for a backup goalie for Marc-Andre Fleury. We all know that Fleury in the playoffs in the past has collapsed. Now, granted, Robin Lehner in the playoffs last year against the Hurricanes wasn't that great. Was fantastic against the Penguins, not great against the Hurricanes. But, regardless, George McPhee did a great job of getting a better backup for his older goalie, a goalie who does have some playoff concerns. I'm giving the edge to the Golden Knights here. It's really not close. I understand why Blackhawks fans are up in arms. I'll repeat what I said. Bowman should be replaced. They should clean house. They should go younger. But don't disparage his memory. Alright, don't take for granted what he did when you guys were constant Stanley Cup contenders. He did the best he could there. You remember how I wanted to keep yesterday's show dedicated to just NHL trades, but I talked about Kreider? Well, I'm going to do that here with Jake Muzzin. Muzzin got signed to a huge deal, a 4-year deal worth $5.625 million a year. So that is a total value of, are you ready for this? $22.5 million. That's a lot of money for Muzzin. But the Leafs have a recent history of letting their defensemen walk. They let Jake Gardiner walk. They tried Dion Phaneuf. That didn't work. And really, besides Muzzin, the only great defensemen that they have are Tyson Barrie and Morgan Riley. You need more than that. And even then, it's a real possibility that Barrie can walk in free agency. He's a UFA this year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Leafs going forward. They had to lock Muzzin up. They overpaid for him, but again, I'm not going to begrudge a GM for doing what he had to do. Moving over now to the worst trade of the deadline. The Barclay Goodrow trade. Look, Goodrow plays the game the right way. He's a solid third or fourth liner, physical player, can score. Solid player. Nothing against Goodrow. But on no planet is he worth a first-round pick. I don't care that it's going to be a low pick. You cannot trade a first-round pick for a bottom six center. You want to tell me you like him because he's cheap going forward? That's all well and good. Don't give up a first-round pick for him. I'll tell you what, Doug Wilson had to be laughing to himself about this trade. This is the biggest win of the deadline. The Sharks destroyed the Lightning here. Oh my goodness. Look, nothing against Goodrow. Solid player. I have no problem with him. And, the Sharks gave up a third-round pick also. But you know what? A first-round pick is more valuable than a third-round pick. If you had just traded a third-round pick for Goodrow, no problem. No one could have begrudged that trade. But to give up a first-rounder for him is insane. It's a Mike Milbury-type move. It's a Peter Chiarelli-type move. There is no way to justify this for the Lightning. I'd be furious about this if I was a Lightning fan. And I know that there are still some Lightning fans that are not over getting swept by the Blue Jackets when they were the superior team last year. There are some Lightning fans that are skeptical about this current regime of Brisebois and Cooper. Look, Cooper's a good coach, not a great playoff coach, but really good regular season coach, smart guy. But I understand why Lightning fans are skeptical. This makes no sense whatsoever. The last trade that I want to talk about is the Nick Cousins trade. And the Golden Knights added a solid third-line center for just a fourth-round pick. They did need center depth after trading Eakin. There's no question about that. I think a fourth-round pick is a very reasonable price to pay for Cousins. He's a good third-line center. He's nothing special, but he's a solid player. He fills his role. There's nothing wrong with him. The Golden Knights easily won that trade. Alright, so now it's time for the winners and losers of the NHL Trade Deadline, and I'll start with the winners. The winners are the Golden Knights, Hurricanes, and Oilers. What the Golden Knights did, adding Lehner and Cousins, I thought was really smart. They addressed positions of need, and they didn't give up a lot to do it. That is how you finesse other GMs. Marc-Andre Fleury needed a better backup. It's possible that we never see Robin Lehner in the playoffs. That's perfectly fine. You know what? This trade was to give Fleury a little bit of insurance, and it's to help lighten the load on him as we draw closer to the playoffs. Great job with that trade, and a great job getting Nick Cousins, adding a third-line center, which they needed after they traded Cody Eakin. Eakin was a failed experiment this year. He was a good try, nothing wrong with that, but to just give up a fourth-round pick for a better player this year in Cousins, George McPhee did a fantastic job. The Hurricanes are the big winners of this deadline. They gave up a lot. Haula, Walmart, Prisky, Luostarinen, Clayson, Kuokkanen, a first and a fourth-round pick. That's a lot to give up. And I'd have liked them to have added another goalie. But They got two of the best defensemen available in Shea and Vatanen, and they added one of the most underrated players in the NHL, a proven point getter in Vincent Trocheck. The Hurricanes are gearing up for a big playoff push, and the Islanders should be scared about them. And any team that faces them in the playoffs should be scared of them. We've seen them upset teams before. It wouldn't surprise me if they did it again. I thought what the Oilers did was really smart, bringing in Mike Green, a veteran presence, to help their young blue line core. I understand that Green isn't having the best year, but again, when you're on a bad team, that's contagious. I do expect Green to turn it around. Athanasiou is a solid player, very underrated, but that's just because he played on lousy Red Wings teams his whole career. I expect him to turn it around big time now that he's in Edmonton and he's going to be playing with more skilled players. And Tyler Ennis, I've always liked. Very skilled player, plays the game the right way. Yeah, he's undersized, but he knows his role and he executes it. I thought the Oilers did a really good job. Yeah, they gave up 2 seconds for Athanasiou, which was a pretty hefty price, but the Oilers are making a legitimate playoff push. Their fans wanted them to do it, and they are going to be a very fun team to watch in the playoffs this year. The losers of the deadline are the Blue Jackets, Lightning, and Maple Leafs. For a team that is in a dogfight in the Metropolitan Division, the Blue Jackets just stood pat, while every team around them got better. I'll tell you what, the best thing that happened to the Islanders wasn't the Pajot trade. It wasn't the extension. It was the fact that the Blue Jackets stood pat. Because the Islanders are tied right now with the Blue Jackets, and the Islanders have 3 games in hand on the Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets are tied for having played the most games out of any team in the league, with the exception of the Arizona Coyotes. I don't know how the Blue Jackets stood pat. I don't care that they added Devon Shore. Very, very bad job by Kekalainen. The Lightning, I just went over it. To give up a first-round pick for Gaudreau is nothing short of criminal. I understand he's cheap. I understand he's young. And I understand that he's a solid player. But at the most, I would give up a third-round pick for him. That's the most I'd give up to get a guy like him. This was the worst trade of the deadline, and Julien Brisebois should be ashamed of himself. The Maple Leafs got a lot of heat from their fans and the national hockey media, or international hockey media, as the case may be, for not doing much of anything. And yeah, I understand why. Look, odds are they're going to make the playoffs. They're better than the Panthers. And I'd be stunned if the Leafs fell out of the playoffs. That's not the issue here. The issue is they didn't get any better. They didn't add a defenseman. They added a goalie earlier this year in Jack Campbell, and Campbell has been very good for the Leafs. But they didn't add another defenseman. Barry, Riley, and Muzzin aren't going to get the job done by themselves. Yeah, they locked up Muzzin long term. Okay, fine. What else did you do? They traded for Matt Laredo from the Islanders. I didn't even know who he was. He was playing in Bridgeport. Look, Sheldon Keefe has established himself as one of the best young coaches in hockey in a very short time. And I like him a lot. But he's got his work cut out for him here. On to college basketball now. And I'll talk about the top 11 matchup that happened yesterday first. And that was Louisville FSU. Louisville is a team that should scare you if you're going to pick them to go far next month. They are centered around one player and one player only, and that's Jordan Nwora. And when Nwora is off, and you saw this yesterday, when he is off, the entire team struggles. Louisville only shot 24% from beyond the arc. Their field goal percentage was fine. I give guys like David Johnson and Ryan McMahon credit for trying to step up, but at the end of the day, they're just not as good as Nwora. They can't carry a team to victory. They need Nwora to do it. And Nwora was non-existent. 4 for 14, 1 for 6 from beyond the arc. He almost had a double-double. That's all well and good, but at the end of the day, his team got blown out. First half, they played well. Second half, they fell apart. They only scored 27 points in the second half while giving up 50. You've got to do better than that. This is a Louisville team that terrifies me. They are a team that could very easily be upset in the first or second round next month. But that's not to take anything away from FSU. FSU has 3 really talented players in Devin Vassell, Trent Forrest, and MJ Walker. And you saw it yesterday. You saw how talented those kids are. All of them scored in double digits. Forrest was the high man with 16. They also got production from Raekwon Gray and Patrick Williams. FSU is a lot more balanced than Louisville. That's why they won this game. Leonard Hamilton isn't a great coach by any stretch, but this is by far and away the best coaching job he's ever done. And it's very possible that FSU makes it to the Sweet 16 or even the Elite 8. Alright, now on to the top 24 matchup tonight. Iowa versus MSU. You can't talk about Iowa without talking about 2 guys, Luka Garza and Fran McCaffrey. McCaffrey is one of the most underrated coaches in the nation. Year in and year out, he has Iowa playing really well. And when you look at Garza, you see Jaren Jackson Jr. 2.0. I'm telling you. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think he's going to be a really, really, really good player in the NBA for a long time. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he made multiple All-Star games in his career. But Iowa does have a couple other good players. Joe Weiskamp is a solid scorer. Good from outside, not great. I'd like him to sort of abandon that element of his game and focus more on his interior game, because that's where he's going to make a living if he's going to make it in the pros. Just leave that to Garza and this guy, C.J. Frederick, one of the most lethal three-point shooters in the nation. He's shooting 47% from beyond the arc. I understand that he hasn't shot a bunch of them, but McCaffrey is putting him there more than he used to. He's getting more comfortable putting Frederick and Garza behind the arc. And Iowa is capable of shooting the lights out on any given day. And when you look at MSU, they're a lot more balanced than Iowa. Really good offense and a really good defense. Iowa doesn't have a great defense. Of course, we all know that MSU is led by Cassius Winston, but Xavier Tillman has stepped up to have one of the most underrated seasons in the nation. He's averaging 13.5 points a game and just under 10.5 rebounds a game. When was the last time you heard Tillman's name? Aaron Henry, too, is a solid player. He hasn't had the year that I thought he would have. Last year he showed enough that I thought he could have really stepped up this year for Izzo, but hey, for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. I highly doubt that he's still mad about Izzo putting his finger in his face and screaming at him. That was such a non-issue. It wasn't even funny. But Izzo should get on Henry more because he's more talented than this. And he's got to execute. If MSU is going to make a big push next month, they're going to need Henry to step up. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think Garza's going to drop 20, maybe even 25. But with MSU being home and the fact that they have the better defense and the better coach, all due respect to McCaffrey, I do like him, I'm going to go with the Spartans tonight. Tomorrow, I'm probably going to recap that game along with anything else that breaks in the world of sports. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.